In the previous lesson, we went and took a pre-built layout, and we're going to actually use that layout as our new web page for our site. So, sure enough, in this My Site folder, I already have those files. Again, if you're just joining us and have not been following along, feel free to just go ahead and go to Lesson 09, copy all of these files, and bring them into your My Site folder. And again, here's the original, so I can go ahead and take a look at that original. Just hit the space bar on a Mac, and here is the new one. So again, I want to swap out all of this content and basically replace it with content from this page, okay, because I do like the navigation on this new template page. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch Dreamweaver, and from my Files panel, I can double-click on Index New. And this was created by going to File, New, and I selected a layout. So that's all I did. I'll click Cancel, because there's sort of more that meets the eye with this file. Because if I take a closer look at it, say for instance in split view, I can see what this file contains. So there's quite a bit going on here. But if I even scroll up, I can see all of the CSS associated with this page. And look how it's actually commented out. And that's what this gray text is. It's just a comment, a little note, just to clue me in on what this CSS style does. So you'll see that throughout these template files, making it really handy. Okay, so that works pretty well, but another thing I can do is I can click right up here, Inspect. So with that selected, it turns on what is known as Live View, and I can go ahead and roll over these different items. And look what it does is it highlights that code on the left side. So this does help me inspect the CSS, especially if you're dealing with somebody else's page. It helps you understand how it was created and how it all works. So I encourage you to use that inspect mode. I can turn that off, and I can turn off Live View, because what Live View is as well is it gives me a live preview of this actual page. So it's like a web browser is actually running in Dreamweaver, and one actually is, by the way. So I'll turn off Live View, and I'll click on Design View. And really what I want to do is I want to start using some of this content from this index.html page. So I'm going to double click on index.html. And here's my original page, and what I want to do is I'm going to just do a click and drag from the bottom on up to select all of this content. And I'll go ahead and go to Edit, and I'll copy all of this content. I'll go back to this Index New, which is what I want to use, and I'm going to select all this text in here, because this is the text I want to replace. So with it all selected, I can hit Delete, and then go to Edit, Paste. Pasted it in. There's all of the text. Looks good, but really there's some formatting issues going on, because obviously this page still looks different from the other page. Let's go back to our original index.html. I can select this image, so just select it by clicking on it, do an Edit, Copy, go back to Index New, and right here where the C is in Classic, just before that, do an Edit, Paste. And there's my image. So again, I'm getting the content in there, but we're still a long ways off. And that's what you'd want to do, is start to eliminate what you don't need, like some of this text as well, and start adding what you do need. So I'll even down here for this footer, obviously I don't want this note, but I still might want to write a copyright 2010 made with recycled pixels. Whatever note you want to add, but that's all set up for me, and I can customize it further. But one thing I want to get squared away is I want the style to match more closely to what I had in this index.html page. So I'm selecting index.html page, and what I want to do is actually attach this Paolo CSS file to this new index new page. Okay, so I'm going back to index new HTML. I can take a look at all of these CSS styles in here. And what I want to do is attach that CSS style sheet to this page. So at the bottom of that CSS styles panel, click Attach Style Sheet. And for the file/URL, click Browse. And again, it's just a matter of locating that CSS file, select it, click Choose. Just like that. I won't worry about the media, but I'll just click OK. And there we have something more that more closely resembles what I want. So again, I go through this process of sort of modifying some of these options. Look over in my CSS styles panel as I twirl that down. Here's the Apollo CSS, all of my rules right up here. This is just the styles associated with this specific page. And I don't want any of these to be on this page. I still might want to keep them, but I actually want all of my CSS to be in this one page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the CSS, I'm going to just do a select of that bottom one, and then I'll hold down the Shift key to select the top one. And again, I want to move this CSS into this new CSS page. So I'll just do a click and drag. So do that, do a click and drag, and when you release, it gives you this dialog box that wants you to resolve these various conflicts. Okay, so it says your source CSS rule has some things going on, and it wants to know whether you want to overwrite your destination CSS rule, which is my Paolo CSS. Well, you know, I spent a lot of time on that design, so I actually do not want to overwrite this stuff. So I'm going to select no. So I encourage you to just select no for all of these, and if there's any conflict, it will resolve them. And now all of that CSS is rolled up into this Paolo CSS. All right, there are a couple other items, and these are my conflict items. I could always select those, and with those selected, I can click the trash can and just get rid of those just like that. Now this is more like it. All of my CSS is in one area, and now I really want to start manipulating this even further. And it's really just a matter of exploring the file and getting rid of what you don't need. Say for instance, if I put my cursor right up here, if I click right here next to this insert logo, well, if I click right there, it says right down here, it says it's part of the header, and that's where that green color is coming from. So I can locate the header right here, but what you can also do is instead of searching for the item, you can click current, and this actually will tell you what the current item is. So right in here you can see there's a summary for the current selection. There's a lot going on with it. Let's try to expand this panel down a little bit more. Here are the various rules. There's quite a bit going on here, but as I select these different items, I can see what's contained in this. Here's this background. This looks like a peculiar color. I can always double click on this property and I can change it. So if I wanted to delete it, I can delete it that way. It gets rid of that background color there. And I can start to remove any other interesting colors that probably shouldn't be associated with this. So use the current panel if it's going to be helpful to you. You can always go back to all and locate a specific item. Again, I happen to know that this is the header, so I can double click on it. If I go to background, there's that green color, and it just might be a matter of deleting it, selecting OK, and it removes that green. So we do have this issue of this white being up here, and that's perfectly fine because this really gives me an opportunity to explore this even further. So again, I can use the inspect mode, I can select current and figure out where that CSS is coming from. Another way even is to place your cursor on whatever you want to select, and right down in here at the base of this document it says div container. So I can select div container like that, or div header. So here's the header, here's the div container. So I encourage you to use this to sort of define what is currently selected. I can go over to current, and sure enough, for this div container, it has this background white color. Again, it might not work for me, so I could always select it and delete it just like that. And this is all part of the process of defining your various CSS rules. So I can even select this area because obviously I want a background of white right here. So I can select this, and this is the content, as it says right here, content CSS. I can go to all, and I can locate that content, and I can change that background. Let's just make sure that is white. And we actually might have a different option right down for this guy right here. Here's another content rule that I'll have to double click and change that background to white right there. Click apply. But you'll notice that as you start to deal with websites, it's going to be really helpful to inspect your site, determine how to select different items, and then start customizing them. So again, still I can go through and do more cleanup. You know, do I need this image up at the top? Not necessarily. Do I like the color of this? Well, maybe not, but I can always go ahead and change that using this panel off to the side. So again, I can select that CSS rule right down here for the properties. I can go ahead and take a look at what the various properties are. I don't always have to double click and change it that way. Here's some different items right up here, the underline navigation. I might be able to see what the various colors are there. And I'd want to start to explore this by using the CSS styles panel and right down here the footer for this content. So if I click UL nav and I go over here and I see that this is, well, this is the UL nav. Well, from there I can go ahead and modify it just by double clicking on it and maybe changing that background. So I'll change that background just to black. Click apply, and that looks a lot better. Same thing for this area right here. I notice that this is the div sidebar right here. Gives me that interesting color, sidebar 1. Not a huge fan of that color. So again, it's just a matter of locating sidebar 1, double clicking on it, and then changing that background. And I can just delete that color, click apply, and it removes it. Okay, so the last change I'm going to do is going to deal with the size of this document because it's awfully wide compared to my original index HTML. So right here, notice how this one actually isn't quite as wide. I'll just close it right now. I don't have to worry about saving it. But for this page, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the width. And it's the same process of manipulating the CSS. Say, for instance, for this content, let's take a look at it one more time. If I select content, right down in here, it says the width is 780. I'm going to change this to 620. Hit enter, and it makes it 620 pixels wide. I can go ahead and select this whole container, as it tells me right down here. I've selected that whole container, and again, you can always click on it down here. But again, if I take a look over here for my container, I can go ahead and change that as well. Right here, here's my container, and again, that's 960 pixels wide, way too wide for my taste. I can change that to 800, hit enter, and that's more appropriate for what I want. So I'd say that looks pretty darn good so far. I'm going to scroll down, and the last area I'm going to focus on is the footer, and I can locate the footer right here, and it's just a matter of removing that color. All right, I've modified the CSS, and remember that's all part of that Palo CSS. So again, I might want to go to File, and I can save all the related files. Okay, and if I don't do that, Dreamweaver will just ask me to do it when I go to publish it. But go to File, Preview in Browser, and just preview it in the browser of your choice, because we'll just take one last look at it. I'll just hit refresh, and there it is. Here's the website design I want to go with. Of course, my next step might be to drop in an image here, but the navigation is all set up. The formatting looks pretty good, and from there I can go ahead and make multiple pages. So the last thing I'm going to do with this page is I'm going to go ahead and save it out, and I'm going to save it as the index HTML. So I'm just going to go ahead and overwrite that previous index HTML since I don't need it anymore. Save that out, replace it, and now this is my new index HTML. So I don't need this previous index new anymore. So I could just right click or control click on it, go to edit, and just delete it. Select yes if it asks you to, if you want to delete it. But I'd say that's good to go. I have this index HTML page set up. What I want to do from here, even though it took some time, what I want to do is go ahead and duplicate this page to make all of the pages for my website. And really that's saved for the next lesson.